All right, I think we are on. My name is Carlenia Springer. I'm the founder and creator of Destiny Embrace and the Sacred Spaces movement. Right now, I have a project called Project Home, and Project Home is bringing 50 individuals and families off the streets of DC, families of African descent off the streets of DC permanently. And I met a young lady named Yaida Ford, and I'm so honored to have her on here today. She is a civil rights attorney. She does a whole lot of work with regards to civil rights and housing and things like that. And so I met her while I was east of the river. We were handing out food, just serving our people, our family in that community. And Yaida, I don't want to take up a lot of time. I really want to hear from you, and I wanted others in the community to hear from you. She's running for Ward 8 City Council member. And
woo, woo,
woo. Yeah, turn it over to you. Let's just have a conversation. I really want to empower people to know that there are things that we can do while the politicians are doing what they do. There are things that we can do to make a difference.
Yeah, thank you, Carlenia, for having me on. It's a pleasure to be on and be talking about some issues that are really close to my heart. And really close to the hearts of our residents in Ward 8. And so just thank you for creating this space to talk about these things that are sometimes politically incorrect to talk about in other spaces. So, so as you said, I'm a civil rights lawyer. I also represent condos and HOAs in Ward 7 and 8, and that's a lot of, consists about maybe 30% of my practice. But I do fly all over the country representing men and women who find themselves in litigation against the United States and litigation against employers or entities involving a myriad of issues. So everything from employment discrimination to police brutality. And I have active litigation in federal courts here in the district, in Maryland, and in Washington State. And that is where I'm from Washington State originally. And I've been living in Ward 8 for 15 years, never lived anywhere else. Once I graduated from law school, I moved straight to Ward 8. Didn't give another ward another thought. This is where I wanted to be. And it was actually from I moved into a condo. And it was actually, I started doing pro bono work for the community when I moved in. And from there, that actually helped develop, when I decided to go out into private practice, I already had my community association that I was already doing work for on a pro bono basis. And that's really how I learned kind of the ins and outs of condo issues. Had a couple of mentors, joined these different organizations to really learn the ins and outs of condo HOA law, and just started to see that all the communities in Ward 7 and 8 were experiencing the same things. After they purchased their units, things were not right. Units were falling apart. Ceilings were falling in on them. Roofs were leaking, and they didn't know what to do. A lot of people, when they buy into a condo or HOA, they think, I just buy it and, that's it. Not realizing that, there was a developer and, the different issues and who they can hold responsible and when, not even understanding their own bylaws. So I saw there was an opportunity there to really get involved and start serving these homeowners who made an investment, a substantial investment most of the time. And some communities, the houses were oversold. They paid. I represent communities where the owners paid way more, way above market rate for their condos and HOAs, and the developers got away with that because this was the first time purchase for somebody. They just wanted to get a place in DC and didn't think anything of it. And then later on, realizing that their mortgage is, $280,000, but the unit is appraising for 150. So they're now 130,000, in the hole, or underwater, if you will, on their property. So this happens a lot in Ward 7 and 8. And it's a huge injustice. I think it is a civil rights issue because it's systemic and it happens to the same communities with the same characteristics. So once you start seeing that across the board and it's a systemic issue and there's no way for individuals to avail themselves of justice, in my view, it becomes a civil rights issue at that point. So I started doing that work initially when I started my practice. Started taking on some employment discrimination cases because I was getting a lot of referrals from federal employees, our federal sector employees. And then got my first police brutality case involving some Ward 8 residents who were in Maryland, actually. And it was a case of mistaken identity. And the police literally, while my client was handcuffed and wrongfully handcuffed, they had the wrong guy. And while he was handcuffed, an officer pummeled him in his head and his face multiple times, causing semi-permanent injuries to this man. And he did it in front of his wife and his children. So there was some severe trauma from that, or his wife and his son, rather. And it was just, that was my first case. Honestly, that was, I mean, I filed that lawsuit in 2013. We finally went to trial. We won the verdict. We won a verdict in January of 2018. So it took 5 years of litigation to fight. So I've been fighting giants since I started. And the issues as it relates to our interaction with police, particularly in Ward 7 and 8. And I find this to be the case, Carlinia, even with people who aren't from Ward 7 and 8, but they encounter the police in Ward 7 and 8. There is a tension in the interaction with anybody who's a person of color who confronts the police in our neighborhoods, okay? And I say that because I represented Diamond Rust, who is a young lady who was beaten by a transit police officer. Her teeth were broken out of her mouth, and he broke one of her legs, alleging that she didn't pay $2.25 to get on the bus. Now, Diamond is not from Ward 8, but Diamond was beaten in front of Martin Luther King Junior Elementary School, which is, it's on that Alabama Avenue and kind of in that Malcolm X, like in that area where those two places converge. And Diamond was beaten in front of her 1-year-old and 2-year-old children. She was trying to get them on the bus when the officer accused her of not paying. She hadn't even gone one stop, and the bus driver waved her onto the bus because he saw that she had a stroller, a 1-year-old and 2-year-old, and she was just coming from Ballou. She's a teen mom, so she attended the Ballou Stay program, and that's why she was in Ward 8. That was where she went to school, and her kids were in daycare. And she was on her way to enroll her 2-year-old into a Chinese language immersion program called Yuying. Okay. And that was a school closer to her home. She lives near Catholic University, and life will never be the same. I mean, when had her face disfigured out front of the elementary school in front of her children. And I took that case against the transit officer. This is WMATA, the Washington Metro, our Metro Authority, and found out in the process of me doing the research and launching, getting ready to file suit, that WMATA is immune from any civil rights lawsuits that involve their police.
You have to be kidding me. I have.
I'm not.
Them having
I wish I was.
And giving homeless people tickets, and they have to appear at this
yeah, right.
The courthouse.
Yeah, I mean, so when I found out, I said the same thing. I'm like, you've got to be kidding. So WMATA is completely immune from this. Like, so their officers can do whatever they want. And so now the only course of justice or avenue of justice for somebody is to sue the individual officer. The reason why plaintiffs' lawyers, civil rights lawyers, do not like that is because you put an officer, if you get to a trial, okay, because they will fight you to the hilt to get your case dismissed and thrown out or knocked out on what we call summary judgment. But if you get to a trial, you're already in the top 2% of any civil cases in the United States if you get a jury, okay? You put an officer up there and jurors tend to sympathize, okay? Even if the officer was wrong, I mean, if you get a verdict, it'll be a very modest verdict, right? And it won't match what WMATA can actually afford to pay. Now, mind you, it's not you or the client versus WMATA, it's the client versus Officer John Doe. So the jury doesn't see WMATA. If they do see WMATA, then they are more inclined to give a higher verdict because they understand that this corporate entity is paying for this. And WMATA kind of touts itself as hybrid government, hybrid this, but the bottom line is they're a corporation. They have a board and they have a CEO. So you put that in the Diamond Rust versus WMATA, for example, hypothetically, a juror is going to think, okay, they're going to then award Diamond if they see that liability is appropriate and it's appropriate to award damages, they're going to award somebody like Diamond, but they're more inclined to an award that is fitting for the damages that she suffered versus Officer John Doe. And they're like, oh, well, he doesn't make that much money. And unless they understand that WMATA is still going to pay for the verdict, then the award is going to be very limited, if at all, okay? Because people still to sympathize with officers. Now, I know that WMATA would pay that, but I'm not allowed to necessarily in a closing argument say, hey, and remember, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, WMATA is really going to pay this. Oh, no. I mean, objections up and down, right? So I have to present my evidence in a way that makes the jury think these are the damages and this is what this case is worth. And it's hard to do that when it's her versus the officer. And I know there is a bias, an implicit bias in favor of police officers. Now that dynamic is somewhat changing, but you know, when somebody survives the attack, it's one thing if they're dead. When somebody survives the attack, the plaintiff's lawyer has a higher hurdle to scale because she lived, right? She's not dead. So we have to look at and factor in, you know, that my client is, you know, she was no longer in a wheelchair. By the time you get to trial, your client has healed somewhat, right? Not emotionally, not psychologically, but the physical damages that they have that were inflicted upon them, you know, they've healed to a degree. Okay, so they might not be in a wheelchair by the 3 years it takes you to get to trial, and that's something that is impactful for the plaintiff side attorney, because how do I do this, right? How do I present this case? You know, I mean, and that's where photos and video and all that comes into play. But by the time my client's in the jury stand, well, she's looking kind of like the officer because, you know, her face is healed. She got a bridge replacement in her mouth, you know, so we have to kind of rebuild this and help a jury relive it. It's a lot harder when you're going up against an individual officer, you know, and at that point in time, you're hoping that the jury awards damages that are high enough to pay, you know, the client's medicals, you know, and then, you know, there's a whole attorney's fees issue because most of us, all of us as civil rights attorneys, the handful of us that are doing this work still in the country, we have to pay for these. Our clients cannot afford to do this. They can't afford litigation, period. And they certainly can't afford high quality litigation. So it limits the number of cases I'm able to take because I put my heart and soul into it and we put our resources into it. But you have to be prepared to lay it all on the line, your practice on the line for God knows how long until that case settles or until you get a verdict. So it puts a lot of strain on the attorney, and we really have to be careful about what kind of cases we're taking. But WMATA is not entitled to this immunity that they're getting, you know, and they get away with a lot. Some of the settlements against WMATA, and I can give you a couple of examples. One young lady, special needs, I think she's about 14, between the age of 14 and 15, officer slammed her face up against a bus shelter. And ACLU took the case and represented her. And the case settled for about $45,000, you know, and ACLU took a fee from that, of course. And that money was put in a special needs trust or something for the young lady. Another African-American young man was beaten up by, I think, some female transit officers. He got maybe $15,000. So you're talking about really small amounts of money compared to the weight that WMATA carries financially, you know, and 80% of their ridership is Black. Okay, so they are making money off of the backs of Black folks, you know, and the agencies that we work for that may pay for our benefits or whatever, our transit benefits and all of that. But yet they are not paying out high settlements. Diamond was fortunate, you know, and I haven't even gone on and really discussed this, but I was able to get a 6-figure settlement for Diamond, you know, and without having to file a lawsuit, because I had started a petition on change.org to put this issue on blast, to say, hey, people, I need your help. I need you to help me talk to the DC Council and Maryland and Virginia, because WMATA is a tri-state entity. So we need to ask our legislators to amend the law so that WMATA no longer has this immunity. And once they saw that petition, I also made a music video. I mean, listen, I was doing everything once I found out that they were immune, and to start kind of a PR campaign. And they settled that case with Diamond, and she got more money than any of the recent settlements in recent history, against a transit police officer.
So they are still immune to today?
They are still immune. The petition is still up on change.org. I testified in front of the Maryland House of Delegates back in February. I testified before council members Robert White in DC and Charles Allen, that's at-large Robert White in Ward 6, last November about this. And we're desperately trying to get a sponsor, somebody to sponsor the legislation in DC. But that's also one of the reasons why I'm running, to segue into why I'm here. We need a maverick on this issue. I believe that council members Robert White and Charles Allen are supportive, but we definitely need somebody to push. You know, they're also very busy, you know, and this issue affects Ward 8 residents disproportionately to anybody else, Ward 7 and 8, because the transit officers tend to have a higher presence at metro stations that are east of the river and metro stations where white riders and black riders converge, like Gallery Place. Okay, so there's a higher presence there, and they tend to swarm the stations when school lets out, because they're going after students, because they know that a lot of our students who ride and are supposed to be riding for free or have their fare card from DC, they don't have it. You know, they don't have the fare card. So they are looking for ways to issue those citations, and they use that as a segue to do racial profiling. Okay, and WMATA has admitted this, that that's one of their tech tools. You know, they use racial profiling, you know, to find out if somebody committed a bigger crime or if somebody's got, you know, other issues. So we know that systemic racism is not even implicit; it's explicit in the way that WMATA officers police our communities. At the November roundtable that was sponsored by Charles Allen and Robert White, it was the committees for judiciary, the Judiciary Committee and the Facilities and Procurement Committee. A retired WMATA officer testified that, you know, they refer to Anacostia as Animal Costia. So there's already a mindset in Metro Transit Police Department that when you're going east of the river, those aren't people, those are animals. And they police our communities accordingly. There is a culture in MTPD, you know, that leads to very aggressive policing, and it leads to excessive force. There's no reason why this officer should have knocked this girl's teeth out of her mouth over $2.25. You know, and to the extent, you know, obviously the arrest was, it was an arrest for fare evasion. She had somewhere to go, even regardless, and it's excessive depending on the level of force exerted. Diamond didn't hit him. She was handcuffed. She was handcuffed when he picked her up and slammed her face onto the sidewalk. What is the justification for that?
I saw an organization called Cop Watch DC. Are they effective? I saw something on Instagram that I just saw a few posts. Are they very active? Are they helpful in this type of thing?
You know, I think it's going to remain to be seen. I mean, there's different vigilante groups popping up, you know, to kind of help hold police accountable, but they shouldn't even have to do it. You know, right. I mean, the accountability is better when it flows top down, from the top of the agency down to the officer. So, you know, it's hard for these vigilante groups to be everywhere, you know, and to know, you know, when something's going to happen. It's easier to address these issues from a policy standpoint to make sure that your officers are being disciplined consistently, you know, because there was another case, and I'm going to tell you, Carlinia, I mean, it's disturbing that almost all the victims are Black. There was another case where an officer pulled out his service weapon on a man holding his 4-year-old daughter as they were leaving the Disney performance up at the Verizon Center. And the officer, who was a white officer, he actually was charged criminally for assault, you know, but I believe he's still employed. Like, he wasn't terminated, you know?
That really bothers me, because silence is compliance as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. And when it comes to that, I don't even have words, because I can't support a system of injustice that's masquerading as justice, and watch our people's lives just being erased, literally erased, and the trauma that's being done to our kids. And then you want to, when kids grow up with that level of trauma and they start to act out, now you want to have a department of behavioral health, and let's medicate the behaviors. When you know that this system of injustice is actually the cause of the problem, that exasperates whatever is happening within individuals within the community, they're already a target. To protect and serve, that lie, that, yeah, they're good officers. I'm not interested in talking about the good officers, because one bad seed, you have all these supposed good officers, and now they are handcuffed. They can't speak, but they have to toe a line. At some point, we have to stand up and say enough is enough.
Yeah, and they run the risk themselves of losing their job, or losing, if they speak out against another officer's act of violence or another officer's misconduct, and that's a very serious risk.
And I'm like, how can we support them? You know what I'm saying? What type of support? And I know it's not good for them to come out and actually speak about that, but those that hear this, they need to speak to their family members. What type of support that's not overt like this can we provide you? What type of oversight, what type of watch? We cannot allow this to happen to our babies. Diamond had babies.
Oh yeah, they were young babies, and when the headlines kind of came out, because DC, the council did decriminalize fare evasion. They took one step because giving out the citations wasn't reducing the instance of fare evasion. This is a poverty. We know that poverty drives a lot of this. But her little boy would point at her face and say, police did this to mommy, police did this to mommy. So what does that ingrain in his young mind about police who are supposed to protect us? And now when he sees the police, these are the people who hurt mommy. So he comes up now hating police or having an issue with authority because of this perverted image that he has in his mind of an officer of the law breaking his mom's teeth out of her mouth for something that he couldn't even see what his mom did wrong. Right? Because she was trying to get them on the bus like they normally do. That's their routine. So what if mommy's routine was criminal, or how does she deserve to have her teeth broken out? So, I mean, we're talking about something that really has generational lasting effects on our children and their mindset and the way they view authority. We need to encourage our kids to become law enforcement so that we are policing in our own communities. That's a problem because a lot of the officers don't come from us. They don't come from our community, so they don't know us, and they police sometimes from a place of fear. And if you are afraid of the community that you're policing, you can't police there. You can't police effectively. So we should be encouraging our kids to become law enforcement. And one of my platforms is, look, we need some more engagement with the police. That's not on an aggressive kind of law enforcement confrontational way, but we need them. The police used to come to my school when I was little. And they would come and they would do career fairs and they would bring their police dogs, and we would be excited, when the sheriff came or when the, police came. And that relationship, especially in our urban schools, needs to be present. We need that so that our kids can be encouraged and say, hey, I want to be that when I grow up. Because now MPD, the last recall that I made was for somebody who was overdosing, in our community here in Anacostia. And I stood outside, and some brothers came outside with me and stood outside while we waited for the police. All the first responders were white. And I said, we can't leave her here. And when the police saw that we cared about her, their whole attitude was different. I mean, they were pleasant. They were like, thank you guys for standing out here. God bless you. Have a good night. Because honestly, we are part of the equation, Carlenia. We have to treat each other with a certain level of care so that the police know that we're watching and we're looking and we care about each other. So that's something that we cannot overlook. They have to see that we care about each other. That will get a different response from them. The second thing is we need to be at the council building raising Cain. There's no way when we have the joint roundtable, first of all, it was at 2:00 in the afternoon. It could encourage our council members to hold some of these hearings after 5:00 so that, Black folks who work can come and support. A lot more people would have been at that hearing, I think, if it was not, or the roundtable, if it was at a time where people after work, and we were there for a good 3.5, 4 hours, listening to the testimony. of people and advocates who had encounters with Metro Transit Police, because the whole topic was Metro Transit Police and the way they police communities of color. That was the whole topic. So we need to encourage our council members. You need to hold these hearings after 5 o'clock. And now that we have some venue space in Ward 8, like at the Rise Center, we need to have a hearing down here in Ward 8 or Ward 7 in some of these communities.
Were they responsive? Where was the council?
Well, let me say, Brianne Nadeau did hold a hearing on homeless services at the Rise Center, and that was the first. I have never seen another council member hold a hearing in our community. Okay, so
I'm asking because I just saw Phil Mendelson, the city council,
the chair.
Chair. Yeah, I just saw a meeting that he had with Ambrose Lane and a few other people, and I was deeply disturbed by his condescending nature. They were pretty much saying that, people right now, because of what's going on, they're suffering. Is there even one thing that you can help us take back to our community? There are people being placed in shelters. They're testing positive. They're putting them in hotels, and then they're bringing them, once the 14 days is up, they're bringing them right back to a crowded shelter. And there was no response. He was talking about figures, numbers, comprehensive plan that they wouldn't meet again until August. And then he actually said, he pretty much didn't like the fact that he felt that everybody was resenting the council members as if they weren't doing their job. And I'm thinking, you are a public servant. Okay, you're a public servant, and I seriously, I'm not a politician, so I don't care. But if he was sitting in a room of white men and white women, he wouldn't have been as condescending as he was. He could barely his feelings under wrap. And I'm like, this is a city council. I'm deeply disturbed. And I understand, whoever gets there, everybody has to work together. But if you have people in place that really don't care about the community, and during a pandemic, they have nothing that they can give, what do you do changing the nature of
the dynamic?
Yeah, they're already there.
And I want to remind people, that's a good point. Council members respond to what they see. I used to work at the DC Council. I worked for Jim Graham when he was living on the Committee of Human Services. So we dealt with all the issues, that affect us. That's homeless services, disability services, juvenile services. You name it, we had it on our committee. Jim was compassionate. Okay, so it was easy to work with him on some of those issues because he wanted to understand. But we, again, and I cannot stress this enough, we have to be visible and we have to be vocal, because right now, unless we are up there at the John Wilson building raising Cain, sending the emails or doing what we need to do to advocate, making sure those phones don't stop ringing, it's easy to miss us. They know what's happening over here, but people have always referred to east of the river like it's over there.
Okay.
And this happens east of the river. These are the issues because they don't see us. They don't see we don't have a presence at the John Wilson building. And regardless of who have the seat, because the seat will change, and regardless of who holds those seats, still have a visible and vocal presence at the John Wilson building. I can go in there raising Cain about all kinds of things, but I need my people backing me.
That's what I wanted to hear. How can we support what you're doing, whether you're there or not? And that's the question, because now, I said, that's what you need. All right, now let's go.
I have to have my people, because when we start showing up, then they start paying attention. You bring all those Black people into the John Wilson building, and not just Black, but people who care, and people are pissed off, then it's going to get attention, right? They can't ignore us. You can call it agitation, if you will, or a nonviolent resistance or whatever, but it's activism, and that's what we need. I think that the social media activism only goes so far. Now it's effective depending on what the issue is, But when it comes to policymakers, it can't just be social media. It can't. We have to be visible and vocal. So a couple of things that I would encourage people to do. So on the WMATA sovereign immunity issue, that is currently an issue that our council hasn't yet addressed, that we're looking for sponsors. My petition is on change.org. You can search for Diamond Rust. It's the common spelling, Diamond. Her last name, Rust, R-U-S-T. Do a search on change.org for the Diamond Rust petition. Every time somebody signs that petition, one of the council members gets an email. And that is how we kind of flood, their inboxes. That is how we get policymakers and their staffs to pay attention. Okay, so that's the WMATA issue. On some of these other issues that are concerning us, particularly police engagement, we need to ask the committee chairs, the ones that are chairs of the committees that deal with the issues that we care about, human services, judiciary, and public safety. That's huge for us. Facilities and procurement is the WMATA issue. Frankly, all of them, economic development, all of them are all important to us. We need to demand that for certain hearings, they need to have them after 5 o'clock, and we need to encourage them to host some of these hearings east of the river. We need to encourage them so that we can be involved, particularly when it's a hearing that's about an issue that we know we can get, 20 or more folks at. Because we can get some people together. Right. Black folks, yes. We know how to rally.
Yes.
We know how to rally people together. So we need to encourage our committee chairs that we need to have some hearings east of the river. And if you can't work that out because of space concerns, because we don't have a lot of venues, we need to have them after 5 o'clock. Because the people want their voices heard. And for our people who are working every day, can't afford to take off or take leave, we can at least make the sacrifice to get to a hearing by 5 or 5:30 so we can be heard. And we need to encourage them to do that because we are voters, we pay taxes, and we deserve to have our voices heard at the council level.
Yaida, thank you for this. Our time is almost up, but I feel like we need to do a part 2 and possibly a part 3 because you have talked about so many things. And I'm all about the solution. So what can we do? And you just said it. We can come together, get 200 people. We can do that and show up at the building, show up at the council, go on change.org and look up Diamond Rust. That's what you said. Yes, please. And there's also Color of Change, which is really our people that are doing the same thing that change.org is doing, but it's specifically, so I don't know if you know about Color of Change, and they will congregate in Maryland, DC, Virginia, create small communities, and I think coming from both of those places, we can get this, we can move some things here for our people, because you're right. When we lift the standard of care that we have for ourselves and for each other, then other people have to act accordingly.
Yeah, so, and one thing I can send you the link, Carlenia, to the change.org petition so you can share that to your networks. I appreciate your support. Definitely anybody who wants to check out anything else about me personally in the platforms, yaidaford.com. But I'll definitely get you the change.org link for Diamond's petition because I need people's voices on that.
Yes. And is there a place where they can find out information about you running for a council?
Yes. They can, if they're on social media, I'm on Facebook at Yaida Ford 4, the number 4, Ward 8. I'm also on LinkedIn, Yaida Ford, and my website, yaidaford.com.
Thank you so much, Yaida. We will have a part 2 and possibly part 3 to this conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thumbs up. Thank you for creating the space, Carlenia. You're on mute.